Welcome to the Murali End. I'm Dominic Machado, and today I am joined by Sri Lanka's number one sports journalist, Estelle Vasudevan. We're not joined by Mark today. He did, we should report, survive the Machado Derby, which was rained out, and he is enjoying a nice holiday in Sri Lanka. So if you're there and you see Mark, say hello to him. But a lot of news to cover. Estelle, you were at the rained out match on Saturday. Obviously, not much to say about it. We were kind of thinking, can Sri Lanka pull off this upset? Your thoughts after the rained out match and what it means for Sri Lanka's World Cup campaign?
I think there are two sides to it, right? Like a real glass half full kind of person would be kind of happy that Sri Lanka kind took away points because let's be honest, Sri Lanka played Australia over the years in 11 ODIs. They haven't beaten them. This is the first no result, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So they haven't taken
Mhm.
points off Australia ever. So the chances of them beating Australia would have been very, very low. So to come away from that game, especially after that defeat to India, would feel good because they're on the board, right? And they're ahead of
Yeah.
teams like South Africa, New Zealand, who are expected to finish above them in the on the table. So
Mhm.
that's one positive. But at the same time, I suppose you could say that you want to play the best teams in the world, right? And how many times does Sri Lanka actually get to face up against Australia? We spoke about this
Mhm.
at the press conference. Actually, I asked Chamari a question like, you don't play Australia often. How do you prepare for a fixture like that? Because it's hard, right, when you don't see an opposition except for World Cup. So Sri Lanka last played Australia in ODI cricket
Mhm.
in ODI cricket in 2019.
Yep.
Um, which was a bilateral that Sri Lanka played in Australia ahead of the T20 World Cup in 2020, and they played them at home in 2016. So it's been
Mhm.
nearly a decade. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that happening on the men's side of things?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you haven't
It's
played the
great.
best team in the world. You've got only
Yeah.
what 10, 12 teams in the women's championship cycle, so 12
Yeah.
top teams. You haven't played the top team in the world in nearly a decade at home. It's
Yeah.
it's insane when
And
you actually think about it, right?
yeah, it's crazy, and it speaks to things like, well, what can SLC do better to get Australia over? Because I would say we've seen that Australia is not averse to coming to Sri Lanka. Their under 19s have just been here for a long tour. They've been here twice in the last two
Hmm.
years, actually. Um, we know the men come over all the time.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously, SLC has gotten Australia to come over even outside of World Test Championship
Hmm.
or any of those kind of things. We need to be trying harder to play
Yeah.
these sides, right? And I think Australia is obviously the measuring stick that you want to compare your side to, and you need to be learning from them about what they do, how they prepare. Yes, you might get it handed to you, you might get crushed, but playing them is really, really important. And seeing how they go about it, seeing how they're so professional. I think this is one of the things that we've talked about is how do we get our players to be professional at the level? And I think the women are quite professional generally. But Australia, which is a team that's kind of taken it to the next level in terms of
Hmm.
professionalism, you can learn so much from them. Right. And I think that another thing that I've noticed about the women's game is that the women are willing to share knowledge with each other and work
Yeah.
with each other and take tools from them. So it's really disappointing to see. And I think about last match they played was 2019, and then of course the 2017 World Cup. We remember Chomri's
Mm.
century from that, right? That 178 that has now kind of entered into Chomri lore. But it's really sad that they didn't get a chance to play this game. That being said, we got to take the points. We're happy
Yep.
we take the 1 point from this game. It puts us in a decent position. Uh, Kind of the big news, I think, coming out of this is now so Pakistan has lost their two
Mm.
matches, right? South Africa had that big loss against
Yep.
England, which kind of now that helps Sri Lanka a lot, right? So we get this 1 point from an Australia game that was likely to be a sure loss, and now South Africa um, has lost this big match to England by a huge amount, getting bowled out
Hmm.
Was it 73 or 69? One of the two.
69, yeah.
Uh, 69, and then England chased it down and within 14 overs. So South Africa will have to play really, really good cricket to make that up, because I think they would have thought of England as a team that they could beat,
Mm.
and that was a team that they definitely wanted to beat. So, Estelle, you've been on the ground for much of the matches that have been played and have been following closely. What are kind of your big takeaways from the first few matches about the brand of cricket being played, how it's being played, and sort of what you've noticed is changing from the general trends we've been seeing in women's cricket?
Yeah, so one thing is the scoring rates, right? And you spoke about South Africa being bowled out for 69. Today, they're at the time of recording, they're 99 for one in 16 overs. So they're going at more than 6 runs and over, chasing
Yeah.
230 something from New Zealand. So obviously, the scoring rates are higher. I think it's actually very interesting when you look at the games in Colombo.
Mm,
I don't think we can actually yet really gauge what the pitch is like. I think a lot of it is being dictated by what teams are expecting,
mm,
because just even previously to just before the Sri Lanka game, Phoebe Litchfield was at the press conference for Australia
yeah.
for the pre-match, and the way she spoke, it seemed like they were also expecting low and slow. It's very interesting to
Mm,
me because it's look, it could be slow out there, right? We are I'm not
yeah.
out there, obviously we are not out there
Yeah.
playing. It could be slow, the tracks could be slow, but at the same time, I don't think they are as slow as people, a lot of people are
Mm,
expecting, because what you would judge by was the most recent series, right? So the most recent series was featuring the Sri Lankan men,
yeah.
and we know that the Sri Lankan men's team has preferred to play on turning pitches that would give them an advantage. But if we
Yeah.
look back to the last time the women played, that was not the case in terms of how the track played out at the R Premadasa. And at the same time, it is my belief that the ICC actually does have a majority say in how the pitches play. Right? Obviously, it's not going to be the home board deciding everything. Um,
Yeah.
so whether it is, that's why, that's one reason actually I was genuinely interested in seeing Australia get out on the track, because what
Yeah.
we've seen from them is that they've been all out attack, right? They haven't slowed down. In the one game that they played, despite
Yeah.
losing wickets at regular intervals, they were never below 6 runs and over. So
Yeah.
they are a team that's going to attack. So I think until we see a real good batting team out there, it's going to be very difficult to judge what the track is playing like, because even if you take India is a good batting side, but
Yeah.
number one, they were playing Pakistan, and obviously
Yeah.
there was a lot of eyeballs on that game and a lot of pressure, I'm sure, on the Indian batters. And they hadn't had a good outing in the previous game as well, right? So
Yeah.
that may have played a part. Pakistan is not a good batting side, so you can't really gauge the
Yeah.
pitch by how they go about things. So I'm actually really looking forward to what happens on the 8th. The rain is another factor in Colombo.
Yeah.
Yesterday we were told that the pitch was basically covered for 48 hours, so there's no way it could have like completely dried out, so there may have been something on the track. So it's this is the thing, right? When you come into tournaments like this, and I think we saw this back in
Yeah.
2019 at the men's World Cup, where everyone was expecting 400 plus scores, and then the weather comes in and you
Yeah.
realize this is a long tournament. It's not like a bilateral that's going to last 1.5 weeks. Things are going to change and evolve, and the weather is going to have an impact. The teams playing on it, the wear and tear, that's another thing we have to think about, right? There are going to be 7 plus 5, 12 games in Sri Lanka
Yeah.
on that square. Whether you switch up pitches or not, on that square it's
Yeah.
going to be used. So 12 pitches in a couple of weeks, sorry, 12 games in a couple of weeks, there's going to be wear and tear as well. So come like the later games, how's it going to
Yeah.
play, all of that, you have to think about, right? And when you talk about approach and stuff, for teams apart from Pakistan and Sri Lanka, everyone else is going to come in for 1 or 2 games, right? So
Yeah.
they have to adapt quickly and adjust their games quickly, because what we've seen from India is, particularly places like Indo, is that the track is good, right? It's
Yeah.
producing a lot of runs. So I just think it's a very interesting game, and it's it should be that way, right? Where players have to come
Yeah.
in and they have to adapt to what's happening. You're not having
Yeah.
any extremes where it's not New York where you're going to be bowled out for
Yeah.
whatever, even though South Africa were bowled out for 69. That was more to do with how they went about things than anything.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very interesting, the venues and how they're going to play out and how teams adapt to what they need to do. Even Australia, I think they've been all out attack, and you would expect them to make it to the semi-final stage.
Yeah.
But from that point, it's anyone's game, right? Anybody can beat anybody,
Yeah.
and
And
that's what makes a tournament like this exciting.
And I think that's the other thing is the strategy changes too, right? So if you're India and you're batting first against Pakistan, what you want to avoid is being blasted out for a
Yep.
very low score, right? That's your fear, right? You don't want, and again, right, we're seeing Australia versus Sri Lanka. I'd imagine Australia might have approached it the same way. The way you lose this match is by getting all out,
Mm,
right? Not by if you take your time and score runs, right? It it'll work out. I think it's also interesting because Sri Lanka are presented, along with Pakistan, with a different approach to the tournament, where they're playing on one pitch and they get used to one pitch. And we've seen that happen before in ICC tournaments. Usually, just not with Sri Lanka being the uh, I don't know if beneficiary is the right word, but being on that particular side of it. So it'll be interesting to see. It's interesting because obviously there's only one venue in Sri Lanka,
mm,
um, and so that brings up the question of the wear and tear of the pitch. And then if there's a semifinal, right, that could change a lot of things if it's low and slow. I also want to point out, I think to your point, Estelle, that you're saying we don't know what to expect from these pitches. I know the men going into that series, the last series, were talking about how they want to prepare better pitches
mm,
at the Pramadasa so that they could score runs, right? So it was kind of surprising to them that they didn't get flat wickets. So
mm.
I'm imagining they're working towards that and they're trying to do that. So I think there's going to be some interesting questions of reading the pitch. I think it'll be interesting to see how the teams that come to Sri Lanka adjust their expectations, and then how can the Sri Lankan side use their advantages
Mm.
to build up on that. So it's been an interesting first week. The tables obviously are, I think we can say we've got one more point than we expected, even
Mhm.
after dropping that game to India where we
Yeah.
were in with a shout. Um, and Estelle, I wanted to kind of point to something you had mentioned in our little preview of the Australia match, where Chalmers in her interview said that as a team, when you're playing against the eight best teams, you want to be able to, you want to say 270. Yeah, we maybe could have bowled them out for less, but that's something we should expect to chase. And I think one, that's a really great mentality to
Yep.
have that uh, we should be able to do that. But two, also speaking to how they're sort of mentally framing how they're going to win, right? It's like put something on the board and we will chase it down,
Mm, mm,
right? And
mm.
it speaks to a lot of confidence. So it's good to see that. Which then brings us to Sri Lanka have the unfortunate scheduling of not playing until Saturday,
Yep.
right? So they're going to spend. So it'll
A
be
week.
what, the 11th? Yeah. So it'll be, oh, but it'll be about what, 12, 13 days since
Mm,
they last played.
mm.
uh, which again, good and bad. They're right. They're kind of preparing intensely, so that's obviously a good thing. They're watching the games. They're in this environment, but they come up against an England side. And Estelle, could you tell viewers who maybe aren't familiar with it, what's the deal with the England women at the moment? Obviously, they had a big win against South Africa, but what are some of the how do they match up with Sri Lanka, and what are your thoughts on Sri Lanka potentially scoring a victory against them?
Yeah, to be honest, firstly, just to touch on the attitude you spoke about from Chamari, I think it was very refreshing to see there were no excuses. And to be honest, she's not the type who would make excuses, right? So her whole thing in that press conference was, yes, the catches cost us the game. We could have had them bowled out, but 271 is a total we should have chased. And she said, um, she was very blunt. She said, look, if you have seven batters and you're playing the seven best teams in the world, you're among the top eight in the world. 270 is a
Mm-hmm.
target you should chase on that pitch. This is our profession. So there's no room for excuses or to say, look, this happened or that happened and that's why we couldn't do it. You have to be able to chase that total. It's not about me scoring runs, right? And
Mhm.
that's a great attitude to have. And I think
Yeah.
the players as a whole, they do take that responsibility. And I know a lot of people who don't watch uh, or haven't seen this team would have thought that when Chamari was dismissed, okay, the game is done. But I think if we were able to put up, I genuinely believe that if Sri Lanka were able to put up a couple of partnerships in the middle, they had batters like Nilakshya in good touch who could have
Yep.
chased 70, 80 runs in the last 10 overs given they had wickets in hand. I don't
Yeah.
think that would have been impossible. And India was not playing their Renuka Singh was not playing. I know Amanjot
Yep.
did well in that game, but they they from the two games we've seen, India hasn't looked as kind of at the mark that everyone was expecting
Yeah.
pre-tournament, right? Everyone was
Yeah.
expecting Australia to be fabulous as they always are, and India to be very close to that standard. And they could end up going all the way. I'm not saying that's not going to happen, but they haven't looked the part at that level yet.
Yeah.
So the attitude from Chamari was good to see, and I think even at training, I was at their pre-match training at the CCC. They
Mm.
were very very relaxed. They put in the hard work, they did the fielding drills, they did the batting, the bowling, but they seemed very relaxed. Like Chamari was very relaxed, the coach was very relaxed. He did a couple of interviews. He spoke about getting the players like mentally prepared for this tournament
Yeah.
and how they want to look at one game at a time and all of that.
Yeah.
So that was great to see from the team. I think coming to England and your question, in the last cycle, Sri Lanka were not that. England is one of the teams that they weren't able to win against in
Yeah.
the ODIs, right? So that will obviously be something that they'll be thinking about. But at the same time, I think for the women, since it is more or less the same team that plays both formats in Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
I think they will take a lot of confidence from the fact that they've beaten them in a T20 series in
Yeah.
England. I think they wouldn't see them as kind of this team that is unbeatable and who they haven't had any success against, because England has its own demons, right? They've got
Yeah.
Charlotte Edwards in as coach now, and obviously that's probably made a difference in terms of mentality and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if I look back to the last World Cup, again they started really well. They look like a team that could go all the way in that tournament, but they faltered,
Yeah.
right? And it was like little mistakes and little oversights and the way they went about things that ultimately cost them. So
Yeah.
I see it as another opportunity for Sri Lanka, right? They've got the advantage of playing at home, and particularly if they manage to chase and survive that new ball spell where the ball is going to be moving around under lights,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a game that Sri Lanka will go into as like extreme underdogs. I know, I'm not talking about betting chances and stuff like that, but like looking at the two teams and how they match
Yeah.
up, I don't think that they will go in as like big underdogs.
Uh-huh.
England will obviously be favored because of the record that exists between the two teams. But like it's not a team of 11 world class players, England. It's
Yeah.
not, right? They've
I
got a
think
couple of really world class players, but it's not a team
yeah,
of 11.
I think it's, if you get through that, if you can stop that top order from getting big runs, you can keep the game within shouting distance.
Mm,
And that's what they've got to look at. What are the plans? And they've got a great opportunity. They've got a week to prepare. How do we get Tammy Beaumont out? How do we get Nat Silverbrunt out? How do we get Amy Jones out?
mm,
And how do we get Heather Knight out? Right? Think about like what are we going to do? What are our tactics? What are their weaknesses? What are their strengths? And really draw on that, because they should think of each game as being a knockout effectively, right? And say,
mm,
what can we do to put it all on the line so that we know what we can do to take advantage of it? Who are the bowlers we should target, right? Who are the bowlers that Chamre should target? Who are the bowlers that Hassani should target, right? And thinking about this as sort of a huge battle, because if they get this win, that'll do a huge a huge service to them making it. So I think it should be one of those games that they really heavily invest in and
Yeah.
use all the resources they have to do that.
Yeah, one other thing that Chamari spoke about and someone asked her about was the fact that they're playing the two top ranked teams right up top. And
Yeah,
we've discussed it as well, right? Where they're playing the top five teams right at the beginning of the tournament and they
yeah,
have Pakistan and Bangladesh later. But in a sense, the fact that they've come out of the first two games with 1 point
uh
already
huh,
probably gives them is better than what was being expected from them, right?
yeah,
You probably were going to, like, if anyone was betting on it, they would say Sri Lanka would go in with 2 losses, but they already have a point on the board. So
yeah,
now coming up against England, now the 3 games to come are going to be critical. What can
yep,
they do against England? If they can put up a win there, then that
yep,
makes things so much better for
yeah,
them because they've got New
yeah,
Zealand and South Africa. As I said, South Africa is coming in. They'll probably win today's game. I mean, they're 119 for 1 in 20 overs, chasing
yeah.
232. They'll probably win, which means New Zealand will be on 2 losses. South Africa will be on 1 win, but because they were bowled out for 69, the net run rate is
They're
going
behind
to
the
always
ball.
be, they're going to always be trying to play catch up with that, right? Unless they can get a similar result to what they conceded against one of the other teams. So this England game is going to be very critical in Sri Lanka's chances because if they can pull off a win, then that puts them in a really, really good position because of the results that New Zealand and South Africa have seen so far. Um,
They've it's the ideal start for them, right? Like they couldn't have
exactly.
planned, obviously, unless you upset India. But
Mm,
apart from that, this is about as good of a start to a tournament as you can hope for. And then I think the other thing that's good is like you don't want to be in this tournament having to play Australia and England the last 2 games as you're fighting for that fourth
yeah.
spot. That puts a lot of pressure, right? It's not going to be a gimme against Pakistan or
Yeah.
Bangladesh,
Yeah.
but really it's these next 3 games. Can you get a win? If you can get a win from it, you put yourself in decent position.
Mm.
Right? Obviously, we'd love to have 2 wins. That would be fantastic. But first, get a win, and then you're in position to fight for that spot. And you never know what's going to happen with the weather. Just a question: do you know why Dirksen is not playing for South Africa?
Yeah, this is my
Sorry,
question
I
as
just
well because I didn't
yeah,
like the 69 all out. I was at Sri Lanka's training, so I didn't catch
yeah,
that game. I didn't cover it at all. Today's game, I haven't been able to watch much, but I can't imagine it's anything to do other than like an injury. But she did carry the
right,
drinks, so it's very
yeah,
confusing to me because the inclusions from the side that played Sri Lanka in that try series are obviously Cap um,
yeah,
and Bosch, right? Those are the two
yeah,
inclusions. So I'm finding it very difficult to understand why she's not playing because I mean she should be in there as a pure batter alone, right?
yeah. Alone,
I
right?
mean,
Exactly, exactly.
so they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bowling options. So I
Yeah,
suppose the only person who they can leave out is Bosch, and I guess they're
yeah,
not willing to
yeah.
do that. But that's a massive call, isn't it?
It's a
We
big
saw
yes,
we
yes,
saw what she could do, and she's. I mean, no disrespect to someone like Cap, but with the bat, she is. I would say Dirksen in form is a more dangerous batter than either Cap or Bosch.
yeah, yeah. I think it's. I mean, obviously, it would be a big call to drop Cap because of how
No,
much she
Cap's not getting
provides
dropped. No
to
way.
that squad.
No, not with
Yeah,
the bowling, but it has to be Bosch in that case, right?
yeah, has to be Bosch, right? And this is a scary. It's a scary lineup because you look at it, Brits in this kind of form,
Mm,
Volvart, Cap, and then you add in Dirksen as well, and you're just like, how do you stop that batting lineup?
I think for
Um,
South Africa, the biggest question is always going to be the keeper because their keepers don't like
yeah,
generally haven't been good batters in the last couple of years, right?
yeah, yeah,
After Mignon Dupree retired.
yeah,
So that is the big question. So Jafta is taking up a batting space basically, but they don't have another option unless
yeah. They don't have
I'm
an
not sure
option
if
there.
Bosch keeps, but another option to leave out would be, I guess, Sunelus, but Sunelus bowls as well. So it's
Yeah,
that's a great question. I was wondering the same because how do you leave? How do you leave
someone
that
who,
kind
yeah,
of play out, right?
who's performed so well over the past 18 months, right? Like, yeah, and she's 24, right? It seems like this is the time to take advantage of how good she's been. But what can you do? Hopefully, against Sri Lanka, she stays out of the she stays out of the
Yeah, I
side.
know,
But
right?
because we remember what happened when she played them, so yeah, okay. So a lot to look forward to. I think this is going to be a really fascinating matchup against England. I think it'll be interesting to see how England approach going to Colombo and playing in Colombo, because I think that'll be. Or are they
Mhm.
going to? Or is it in this one in India?
No, they are coming to Colombo. So they're
They're
playing
coming to
match.
Colombo. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
because I
they're
know
playing
there's
in
one more
Bangladesh
game in
tomorrow.
India. Yeah.
Yeah, they're playing Bangladesh tomorrow in Guwahati, and then they'll be in Colombo.
Okay. Yeah, so that'll also be the interesting part. How do you play that? I think another thing we've talked about is because of the rain, it also changes the sort of how do you pace an innings if you don't know if it's going to
Yeah,
be interrupted or not.
especially if you're batting first,
Obviously,
right?
yes, if you're batting first, right, and that causes all sorts of questions. So
Mm.
obviously, you want to win the toss and chase. In the women will want to the Sri Lankan women will want to win the toss and chase, but there's all sorts of tactical questions. All right. So, two other topics for today. Anything else you want to touch on with the team,
Yeah, one
Estelle?
more thing. I think
Yeah.
yesterday's game against between India and Pakistan, the
Oh, yes, the
crowds
crowds.
quite decent, right? Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
was not expecting that number of people to turn up, and the vibe in the stand was great. I know for viewers, yes, basically three and a half stands are empty. Okay, yes, but I think there was more crowd than was expected, and even the washed out game between Sri Lanka and Australia, there was a smattering of crowd that actually stayed throughout until it was announced that the game is not going to go ahead. So I would expect Sri Lankans to turn up. Please turn up on Saturday. It's a weekend. I think the
Yes.
schedule has been adjusted in a certain way so that you give maximum opportunity for crowds. So I do really hope that people turn up on Saturday for that game and the rain stays away. But
And it's
yesterday's
free.
game, yeah, and it's free entry, right? And
Yeah.
I mean,
It wasn't
main
expensive
gate,
anyway, but yeah.
yeah, it was $100 anyway. But like main gate, you get the best stands, right? Like the best
Yeah.
seating. There's no reason why you shouldn't turn up because at the end of the day, it's a World Cup, right? When was the last time Sri
Yeah.
Lanka hosted a ODI World Cup in 2011? So it's taken a while. And I think it's also important because it shows the ICC that there is interest. And that
Yeah.
would mean that more hosting opportunities might be considered, right? And um, uh, just from the vibes outside, some people know about it, some people don't really know about it, so that outreach is really important. So if you're watching this and you're thinking about whether you
Let
need to
everyone
come or not,
know.
this is where you,
Yeah.
I think, this is where you show your support. I know a lot of, I don't know how people are going to take this, but a lot of people ask me about equal pay, and they ask me about, why aren't they being supported, why don't they have the resources the men have, and people go to extremes to talk about, what they give the men they should take away and give the women because the women are performing well, and all those kinds of conversations. This
Yeah.
is how you show your support and show that this is a team that should be invested in
Mhm.
by turning up for games, because at the end of the day
Exactly.
those numbers matter. It's not about selling tickets, right? It's about people realizing that there is interest, and I know there is interest because
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who don't really watch cricket who are now interested
Yeah.
in the women's game.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this, you have to, if you want to support women's cricket, this is how you support. You turn up for games.
And I think it's one of those things too where I can talk about my own parents, right? Because they grew up only seeing men's cricket,
Hmm.
but they've been turning on the matches at home to watch the women play, and there's definitely a feeling of excitement about what's going on, right? How can you not? They're one of the 8 best teams in the world playing a
Hmm.
world cup. Go out, support them, give them love. Mark is going to be there in the stands as well. Estelle will be there. So if you're a fan of the show, just show up. We'll be well represented. Another thing I wanted to point out, I think it'll be interesting, Estelle, as more international tournaments are planned for India, how the fact that likely there's going to have to be games played in Sri Lanka is going to
Hmm.
affect the scheduling of them, right? Because obviously, if they had known that Sri Lanka would be playing host, October would not have been chosen as the month in which
Probably
they
not.
hosted
Yeah.
this tournament. Yeah, probably not. Hopefully not. Um, so that's one thing to see going forward, because obviously India is going to continue to host, and geopolitical circumstances.
Mm.
I mean, I'm no Nostradamus, but I don't know that things are going to change too much in the years to come. So that'll be interesting to see. Two other pieces of news, one confirmed and one kind of rumored. So the first piece of news is that Sri Lanka have hired, the Sri Lankan men's national team has hired a new batting coach and spin bowling coach. So Julian Wood of the power hitting clinic fame, who we thought had gone to Bangladesh, has been hired as the batting coach. And Renee Ferdinand has been hired as the spin bowling coach, and they're replacing, right? We talked about the ad that came out a few months ago looking for a new batting coach and a new bowling coach, and we thought, oh, Kandabi and PL Vijatunga are not going
Mhm.
anywhere. So, Estelle, thoughts on these two hires?
I'm kind of surprised because,
Yeah,
I mean, our expectation was that certainly Pial has been, how long has he been in that job, right? He's been there for
2006, almost
for
20 years.
nearly almost 20 years in that job. And look, there'll be people who approve of how he's gone about things and some who haven't. I think if you look at the recent years, um, it's very difficult to justify him staying on. In that, one, two, I will take two key examples in Ramesh Mendis uh,
Hmm.
and Praveen Javikrama. I
Yeah.
think two young players who showed a lot of promise when they
Hmm.
started their careers and then have just nosedived. That, I
Hmm.
mean, the performances have nosedived so badly, um, that you can't, like, I mean, the way things they've been tried to tweak things around them is kind of insane to me. Like, I remember watching
Yeah.
Praveen Javikrama trying to alter his action, right? And he's barely 1 2 years into his career, and he's
Yeah.
already trying things uh with how he delivers the ball, right? And that's bound to be tough. Another one is probably Ambuldenia, right?
Yeah. I
Got
was just gonna
injured,
say, yeah.
never came back,
Yeah.
right? So whether that is, I'm not saying that's purely Pial's responsibility or his fault or whatever, but at the end of the day, this is a performance based sport, right? You have, like, there has to be performance.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're whether you're doing your job or not doesn't matter, right? There has to be results. So if you look at it in that way, it's very difficult to justify them keeping Pial on. I'm not going to get into technicalities because I'm not an expert in spin bowling, right? But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, you want to see players who show promise actually growing and not going the other
Yeah.
way. In terms of
Yeah.
Julian Wood, I think the power hitting is long overdue. It's long
Yeah.
overdue, right? Um, was I can't remember whether I was talking on the Murali pod or not. I remember a couple of weeks ago we were doing an Asia Cup game review. I was doing it with Beram
Yeah.
on Good Areas, and he asked me, how does Dasun Shahanaka still get into this side? Because the opinion of Dasun Shahanaka, obviously, if you look at his numbers, are not great, right?
Yeah.
Their numbers are not great. And I told him, because no one can hit like him. No one can hit like
Yeah.
him. Whether he does it 1 in 10 games or 1 in 15 games, that one no one can replicate, and that is the problem
Yeah.
that Sri Lanka have. They don't have middle order batters who can do that. People like Kamidu Mendis are not that type of player. He has
No.
had success, but is that is purely like, it's not luck, but it's like his skill in adapting to the way the
Hmm.
game is playing and just utilizing his talents to the best of his ability,
Yeah.
right? It's not
Yeah.
purely that power that's got him results.
Yeah.
So
He's
this
not like Tim
appointment.
David coming out there, right?
Exactly. Tim David is the same
Yeah.
player I was thinking about as well, right? Like, if
Yeah.
you look at other teams, they've got that raw power in the middle order. Sri Lanka don't have
Yeah.
that. So that appointment as well, I think is very good, in that you need that kind of, you need to grow, you
Mhm.
need to get to that level. What I'm very interested actually to know is, so my understanding is that Sanat Jayasuriya had a say in bringing Kandambi and the likes of Jahan Mubarak onto his
Yeah.
coaching side, right? Whether there was input from him or whether this is SLC saying, no, we need these positions filled. We're not seeing results. Um,
Yeah.
so we're going to hire these guys. That is what I'm curious about, because obviously it's important how coaches work together as well. He's head
Yeah,
coach. He needs to be able to respect the the skills that these two coaches are bringing into the game as
yeah,
well, and at the same time they need to have a high enough opinion of his to understand that they have to work together, right? So
yeah,
that dynamic is going to be very interesting to see.
yeah. And I think it is interesting because when the call came out, they explicitly said they were looking for foreign coaches.
Mhm.
And part of me wants to read that as, um, if you are a Sri Lankan local coach and you disagree with Sanath, what are you going to do? Right? Like, is Kandabi going to go up to Sanath and say, you're just talking nonsense and have an effect? Right. So I wonder if you have some people who have these, credentials, right? Because I think one of the things that was interesting, Ferdinand's, I'll be honest, I hadn't heard of.
Mm,
He's got a PhD in biomechanics and has worked at the BCCI Cricket Academy, and he's worked as a consultant for New Zealand cricket. So I think that's really interesting that they went with someone who has really specialized
mm,
knowledge, right? And they want someone who will work with their bowlers to make the most of it. And the guy who I was thinking of, in addition to those names you rightly brought up, was Lakshan Sundakan, right? Someone who came in with tremendous promise. You get very few bowlers who can turn the ball like that, and he's a
yeah.
left arm wrist spinner,
Mm,
and so it's interesting to see. Um, I'm a little wary of the
mm,
spin bowling coach hire,
mm,
because we saw this. I think John Howard was hired Australian spin bowling
mm.
coach last year, but then within a few months we saw Pial back on the bench, and we never heard what happened to Howard. So like I am a little weary, right? Is he going to be with the side? Is he gonna be in the high performance
Mm,
center?
mm, mm,
Right? What role exactly does he play? So that'll be interesting to see. Wood, I think, is a really good hire. He's worked with the ECB, he's worked with Punjab Kings, he's worked with county sides, uh, very pedigreed. He had gone and coached in Bangladesh, and I think
yeah.
SLC saw that and thought, okay, like Bangladesh has massively improved their power hitting game.
Mm,
They've ramped up their sixth hitting. It's worked really well for them. And I think SLC will do well to have someone who has this focus. And I think particularly in that what's happening for the next 2 years really is you've got this T20 World Cup coming at home, and then you've got one coming up. You've got an ODI World Cup coming up in South Africa. So really revamping this style of play is going to be important. I think one thing that I'm curious about is, does that change the way they select players? Right? Because as you said, Camino Mendes is batting at six. If you asked any other team in the world where he should be batting, they would not put him at six or
mm,
seven. They put him at three or four or two
yeah.
or open, right? Any of those things. So will it lead to a consideration of other players like Movin Subasinghe, players who have more power in the game, Vishen Halambage, who has more power in their game? And I think, when we critique Dasan Chanaka, one of the things that we forget is that it's really hard to be the solo power hitter.
Mm,
Tim David has Marcus Stoinis and Glenn Maxwell, right? England has a bunch of guys who hit for power. So expecting someone like Dasan Chanaka, you can't expect a guy whose game plan is hit 100-meter sixes to go
mm,
to go
mm,
off every single match. You need people who complement him, and you need ideally three hitters down the order
yeah.
who, if one of them fail, that's okay, because we have two other guys who might come in and make a big difference. So I'm curious if the perspective on how to approach a T20 innings changes under Wood, right? Like,
Yeah.
as opposed to saying, let's stack seven top order batters together
Hmm.
and that's going to be what gets us through. Will we see roles change? So I think that's something that'll be really interesting to see if their strategy for how they approach a T20 innings changes. Because I think one of the things that we've talked about is that the potential is there. It's about leveling up the
Mm,
strategy and saying, this is how we do it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. The big test for them is they've got a tour of Pakistan coming up in November, followed by a Pakistan Afghanistan tri series. So a lot of good cricket to be played. So we'll see how those changes start to come into effect. Um, the other big news, and this will kind of be the last point, is there are rumblings that LPL is going to run from December 1st to December 23rd. So everyone put that in on your calendars with pencil, not with pen. Um, but the real rumblings have been that Indian cricketers may be permitted to play in the LPL. And Estelle, if that's true, and again, we haven't seen any official announcements. What do you think of that?
Firstly, I will say I won't believe it until it happens,
Yeah. Until there's
because
that
it
BCCI
it feels
announcement.
like it feels like, why would they do that, right? That's my thought behind it. There's nothing really much for them to gain out of it, um in terms of what people think of as finances, right? Like, in terms of that, there's really nothing much to gain from it. But if by I mean, this is a long shot, but if it is true, then that would mean more viewership, right? That's the big
Mhm.
difference I think it would make, is that if you
Yep.
can rope in a couple of, it doesn't even have to be like the top tier, like the Surya Kumar Yadavs and, Bumrahs. But if it can be even like a lesser players, like,
Harshdeep
like people
Singh.
like, and
Yeah.
people like Sanju Samson has like massive
Yeah.
following, right? If you
Yeah.
can rope in players like that, it would make a huge difference for viewership, and obviously that means more sponsors, all of that. I think Sri Lanka first, the LPL needs to sort out its ownership, right?
Yep.
That's the first
And I
thing.
think that's the
I
other.
don't think we are
That
going
was
to
the other
draw
thing.
any Indian players of any like serious stature if we don't
Yeah.
sort those things out
Well,
first.
that's what I was wondering. Was that I wonder if this is a contingency, sort of like we will invest money, but we have to have players here, and we have to have a following to create more money. So I wonder if that's kind of the carrot that's being dangled, is
Hmm.
that we can make this profitable for you by doing this. If you release your second tier play, because obviously I don't think Boomer is coming to, it is coming down, or I mean, but again, from a playing perspective, I think it would be really great for our players to spend time
Mm.
around an Indian setup. So, anyways, I think that's pretty much all we've got for today. Uh, Stay tuned to the Murali End. As you know, always powered by Kid Rated, a site that you want to use if you want to check out what places are good to visit for kids. And we will be back on Saturday with coverage from the game. Keep your feeds open. Estelle provides lots of really good reports from practice. She gave us an amazing preview of the Australia match, even though it didn't happen. Uh, but like, subscribe, follow, and we've been the Murali End, and we will see you soon. Thanks. Bye.